Welcome to Boomer Between the Games, presented by Xfinity. I'm your host, Boomer Esiason. Now, later on, we're going to take a look at Carson Wentz and his performance Monday night against the Bears. We'll also preview the upcoming games. But first, let me welcome into this week's guest, and that would be Brian Jones. Brian, a former NFL player. He's also an analyst on CBS Sports Network for NCAA college football, and also a co-host of Gio and Jones on CBS Sports Radio in the morning. Brian, great to always talk to you, and I know that you probably have a little bit of a take on what happened with the Ravens against the Browns. And the thing for me in regards to the Ravens, and I don't know if you feel the same way, but first and foremost, health is the most important aspect, and then who you play. And the Browns have to be the worst team in the league, and probably one of the few teams that would be willing to give up a 20-point spread the way that they did in the second half. And Joe Flacco certainly has found a new toy in Mike Wallace, because they have really been explosive the first 2 weeks of the season.
Hey, you're correct. Mike Wallace has resurrected his career after the Pittsburgh, then the move to Miami, Minnesota, and he didn't look anything like the player he was in Pittsburgh in any of those stops. Now here, first couple of weeks with Joe Flacco and the Ravens, he's played much, much better. Maybe that's going to be a solid fit for him finally. And speaking of health, Dennis Pitta, remember he got injured on that same field he played on the other day, and he showed up and showed out and provided a great target for Flacco and the Ravens. But it was about the Browns and self-destruction once again. You get up to a big lead, 20-0 in the first half, 197 yards in the first quarter, and then really nothing after that. They were put on lockdown. The Ravens battered and bruised. Josh McCown, he could barely raise his shoulder, after that first quarter, because they finally got to him, and just an excellent comeback. I think it's the second largest comeback in the history of the Ravens. Of course, they haven't been around but a couple of decades, but to get behind the eight ball that early in the ball game and claw your way back, culminating in the big interception by C.J. Mosley there to seal the deal. Impressive win for the Ravens.
One of a handful of 2-0 teams, Brian. I'm not so sure that I'm totally sold on the Ravens just yet, and the reason I say that is because they are in a very, very difficult division. And certainly the Browns are the worst team in football, but the Bengals and the Steelers will present much more difficult games for them in the future. Now, the Ravens, for me, are a team that obviously looks completely different than it did last year because of the injuries. Now, another team that looks completely different to me this year, not only because of injuries, but because of all the changes around them, is the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I did the game Monday night in Chicago, and Carson Wentz answered the call again, and even his head coach, Doug Peterson, said he looks like a 10-year veteran out there, the way that he kind of handles the huddle, the way that he gets the people in the right formations, and then when he comes to the sideline, the conversations are very high level. And I think what he means from a quarterback standpoint is that Carson Wentz, as a rookie, is reading defenses. He's able to talk about defense. He's able to talk about adjustments at halftime. And those things are just not easy to get along, especially from a rookie quarterback. I don't know if you've ever played with a young quarterback on the teams that you played on, but I can tell you from my own personal experience, this kid looks like he literally is 10 years into his career after only 2 games in the NFL.
Well, I caught some of your call the other night as I was flying back into the city, Booms, and I tell you what, I was as perplexed as you were when they had a decision down there on the goal line, did the Eagles, and they were up 22-7, and they decided to go for it, and it worked out for them. So what they're doing right now, what they're dialing up is working. And as far as Wentz, man, he's as cool and calm and collective as he was in that duck blind when they called to tell him he was the new starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. And that growth, you're right, you see it. And not only in the first week versus Cleveland, but the other night versus Chicago, the guy does not get flustered. It's not too big for him.
2 big matchups coming up this weekend. The Eagles will be hosting the Steelers, and of course the Redskins on the road at the New York Giants. For the Eagles, a great start for Carson Wentz, no question about that. He will now be facing the toughest defense he'll have seen all year. Remember, they played the Browns and the Bears, 2 of the worst teams in the league. Now come the Steelers, who can put up points against anybody, as we've seen the previous 2 games with Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown. And they should be getting Marcus Wheaton back. This is going to be a big test for the rookie quarterback facing this 3-4 defense that the Steelers will be throwing at him. Okay, so now we have the 0-2 Redskins visiting the Giants. I don't know about you, Brian, but the Redskins are a mess right now. This has probably got to be one of the more disappointing teams, as they've lost their first 2 home games at FedEx Field. This has got to be a desperate team. Remember, If you go 0-3, there's a less than 3% chance that you will make it into the playoffs. So you and I both know about desperation, especially when you're 0-2 and you're traveling on the road against one of your division rivals. I like the Giants in this game, and specifically like the Giants because of the money that they've spent on their defense, and I think that they will make it difficult on Kirk Cousins, who's hearing whispers from his own locker room, which is not a good place to be if you are a starting quarterback in the NFL.
And he's hearing whispers also from his head coach, Jay Gruden, and he stated this last weekend versus the game, versus the Cowboys, I should say, in the game versus the Cowboys. And he's not playing at the same level he was a season ago that helped him garner that franchise tag. Didn't ultimately get what he wanted, which was the extension there with Washington. I'm buying what the Giants are selling on defense. Money well spent. They've got an excellent secondary. That front seven is very physical, very tough right now. You hold Drew Brees and the Saints to 7 points. That is impressive as it gets. They are stout. You're not going to be able to run against them. Very physical football team, tough-minded. So I like them going up against this game. And now you got Victor Cruz, who's healthy, made a spectacular catch a week ago, and Odell Beckham. Too much to tend with if you're a Washington defense that hasn't been able to apply a lot of pressure versus opposing quarterbacks. And Eli knows how to ratchet it up, and he had gaudy numbers, no touchdowns to speak of, but he'll be just fine. I'm digging the Giants right now.
Yeah, you and I both are. All right, time for our Twitter question of the week presented by Xfinity, and this is going to be from at DJ_6Smith, and he wants to know, which 2-0 team do you believe in the most? Would that be the Giants, the Vikings, or the Texans? Hashtag BoomerBTG. What do you think, Brian?
Man, those are some great defenses he mentioned. I'm going back to the Giants. I like this defense a ton. They played on the road in a tough place in Dallas, although that stadium is not formidable. It's more like a museum. But I like what they're doing. And as I said about Eli, although he didn't have any touchdown passes, still threw for 380 yards. He's got a healthy receiving core. Sterling Shepard, as advertised, he's doing what he did at the collegiate level there in Oklahoma. I'm buying the Giants right now, and that's not to sleep on the Eagles and what they've been able to do. And the Vikings like their defense, but Sam Bradford looked better. But we'll see how he does his second ball game under the helm there for the Vikings.
If I had to rank these three teams in order, I would go Vikings, Texans, Giants. And the reason I say the Vikings, they are my preseason Super Bowl pick, and they are better with Sam Bradford at quarterback. I know they've lost Adrian Peterson, so there you have it. Hey, if you have a question for us, tweet at us with hashtag BoomerBTG, and maybe we'll use your tweet on the show. Hey, Brian, thanks so much for being a part of our show. I look forward to talking to you later on in the year. Enjoy the football season. Enjoy the college football season. And boy, do you look good on CBS Sports Network.
Thanks, Booms. I'm trying to match you on the NFL Today, baby.
All right, have a great one. Thanks for tuning in to Boomer Between the Games, presented by Xfinity. Xfinity X1 will change the way you experience TV.